Hey, how are you? Thank you. Look, really excited to talk about this topic of looking for operational efficiencies. Not the sexiest part of email marketing, admittedly, but it is sort of that necessary underpinning so that we can do all this stuff and think about all these great ideas of personalization and innovation, all that kind of stuff. So, wanted to welcome my esteemed panelists, and I'm going to ask them to go down, do a quick introduction of themselves, name, company, your role, and then if you could give just a picture of what your team looks like so we have some context for the work you've been doing from an efficiency standpoint. So I'll start with, how about Grace?
Sure. So I'm Grace Cocco. I'm a product manager at Everything But the House, which is a company based in Cincinnati that does online estate sale auctions. So as opposed to a traditional garage sale or yard sale, we'll come in, take your items, photograph them, list them, and put them up for auction on our site and ultimately ship them to your buyers. So I am on the product team there, and our product team works closely with our marketing and brand teams to take on all of our communications. So we kind of have 3 teams working together and a couple people on each team that are here and there kind of working on email. So the reason I thought that this would be a great panel is because we kind of have to operate efficiently out of necessity because we don't have a fully focused team on communications.
Wonderful. Anitra.
I'm Anitra Fenderson. I'm from Capital One, and I co-lead the messaging, design, development, and innovation team. A reason that I thought I'd be good for this panel is I have a fairly large team. We're about 35, 40 people across 5 locations. So we have to have that efficiency because we have so many people and we have so much work coming through. Our team directly partners with a process team, which I told the panel initially we dreaded and were like, oh, this is gonna be terrible. And over time have really come to value and almost feel like we're secondarily process people now.
Wonderful. Marlies.
Marlies Roberts. I work for a company called Grand Circle Travel and Overseas Adventure Travel. We are a brand that provides international travel for retired Americans. So it's small group adventure travel, European river cruises, that's the type of stuff that we do. I head up marketing operations there, and for email specifically, we have about 6 people on our team that are handling kind of the one-off campaigns on a weekly basis, and another team of 3 people that are doing development of more automated things. I'm a huge process person, so that's why I wanted to be part of this panel. We've created a lot of really great operational efficiencies over the last few years, coming from a mainly direct mail-based approach to how we do our email to being much more streamlined and efficient.
Wonderful. So let's jump in. So each of you have had very different organizations, different experiences. Let's talk about what some of the problem areas were. And then give me one really solid, this is an area where we really had to dig in and we were able to see some measured improvements. So I'll start with Anitra.
I think over time, obviously, we have increased the volume that we've sent since I started at the company 10 years ago. And there's always a push to get things out quickly. The quicker you get them out, sometimes you have more mistakes. And so we had to find a way to have quality and not have mistakes going out to customers, but also get things done in a reasonable amount of time. So my team has gone through probably 6 or 7 full-on Kaizen sessions of process redesign, sometimes very early on to the point of extending our process out to ridiculous amounts. But then we would come back and say, okay, that helped us with the quality, but now nobody wants to work with us because it takes 40 days to get something out. So how can we optimize, make sure we keep that quality? What are the actual specific things that we have to do to get things out more quickly? So we have worked over time and have really gotten it down to a good place. I think one of the big things that we learned was if we are developing the creative, we have to separate that build from the execution process. And that really has allowed us to be flexible. And if someone comes in and they need both parts of that, they understand that the schedule is going to be a little bit longer. It's going to.
This is another one that maybe has some different rules.
For us, the difference is if the creative has been developed by either an internal brand team or an agency, something like that, they're coming to us with files that have already been created, they've already been approved by our internal email review board process, they've been approved by legal, all of those steps are already done. Then we take it, we code it, we do all of our testing, our render testing, make sure everything is good, and then set the campaign up to go. In that case, we can go a lot faster because it's done, but there's less innovation, there's less flexibility, they have to follow a template. Versus if you come to us and say, this is what I'm thinking, and really allow us to take the time to concept, come up with what's best, that's gonna take a little longer. There's still a process around it, but it's a little-
It's just a different process.
Yes, it's a different process.
Exactly. Marlies.
So for us, I would say it's two main things, similar to what Anitra said, but really having people that are dedicated to improving processes. So anytime we're trying something new or something doesn't seem to be working well, it's going too slow, or we have accuracy issues, we have a team that's dedicated to kind of jumping in and figuring out a better way to do things and to make it faster and have higher quality. Also leveraging technology, so we're using Adobe Campaigns platform, and we really centralized a lot of our teams around that so that they're using the same tool to get things done more quickly, and also a creative workflow tool that we're using, which really standardized processes across the company for how we get things done.
Wonderful. Grace.
So for us, on the product team, one of our main goals is to enable the marketing and brand teams to send campaigns as quickly as possible. About a year ago, we built a component library of HTML components for the teams to use to kind of piece together these templates and emails. And as you can imagine, when you hand a library of HTML components to someone who's not very familiar with HTML, kind of waiting for a disaster to happen. So instead of building this tool where it would be very additive for all of the components, we instead just recently implemented more subtractive templates. So making sure that all of the components play well together, look well, they're responsive, and we hand those over to our marketing and brand teams. And this has been really helpful for a few reasons. The templates are very flexible. All of the components can be toggled on and off pretty easily. So it removes the need for the people who aren't comfortable coding to actually get into the actual code. So we removed all of the HTML variables that they would need to change, and they're adding them into a code snippet instead of the actual HTML. So this makes it really easy for a team of non-developers to get something out the door really quickly. And it also gives them the opportunity to do a real-time mock-up with a live-coded email versus trying to translate something that has been, designed in Photoshop or something else.
So how long is this subtractive template? Give us an idea of scale or rows or modules or some sort of, how big is this thing?
So they're actually pretty reasonably sized. They're not huge. The idea is that if you did include all of the elements, it would still work as a fully functioning template. And then you can toggle off images and certain cards, for example, or turn off sections. And it gives them the opportunity to have a really, really flexible template that's really simple to use instead of having a whole library of stuff that they're not totally familiar with.
Right. So I know we have a couple of examples where there was part of introducing new efficiencies was actually looking at the team and how things were structured. So I'd love to hear different perspectives on how reorganizing the team may have helped drive some efficiency, and there were some wins there.
So for us, we've established 2 separate teams that handle email. So we have one group that's working directly with the brand and creative teams to get out kind of our weekly one-off campaigns for filling inventory and that sort of thing. So with that team, that's the one that we really centralized around our ESP so that they're using the same platform. Previously, we had 2 separate tools. So we had a team that was doing all of our audience segmentation in one tool, then they had to send over the audience file for each campaign, then the email team had to upload that list, and then they would actually deploy the campaign. Now that all happens in the same spot, and it's the same people doing that work. So we cut probably about 1 week of time for creating an email and just sending it out. So that was huge. And then we also spun up in the last couple of years a dedicated email development team that handles all of our marketing automation. So that team's kind of taken out of all of the chaos of supporting the brands and really just devoted to improving the existing automated campaigns we have or developing new behavioral triggers.
Well, you said something here there, the chaos of supporting the brands. I don't understand that. How is it that you guys are reacting to the brands? When you say that, what does that mean? What is that introducing?
Sure. So for where I work, there's 3 main brands that we're supporting, and they all have different goals that they're trying to achieve, whether it's filling ships or promoting a new exotic location that we're going to. So we're the one team that supports all 3 of them, so we have to kind of manage what that marketing schedule looks like and really hold them accountable for meeting deadlines in order for our team to get their things out on time. So we put a lot of processes in place and a lot of deadlines and ways to hold people accountable for hitting those deadlines because otherwise their stuff is just not going to go out.
So what is it? Yeah, what are the consequences? Because sometimes just compliance is a huge part.
The consequence is that your email is not going to go out the door when you would like it to. And we really just kind of hold the line on that, and that's kind of what's...
Right, I know there was at dinner, there was somebody who was mentioning that instead of asking for permission, it was just, hey, this is what's going to go out at this time tomorrow morning. And if you want it to change, you need to let me know, right? So the flip side of that as well. Anitra, your organization has really kind of grown, changed, morphed, expanded over time. Can you talk a little bit about how you're organized today, why you're organized that way, and how it's kind of helped in driving efficiencies?
Sure. When I started at Capital One, I was the 3rd designer on the team, and I mentioned now we have 30 plus designers in multiple locations. So we have drastically grown, and we are also aligned to the businesses within Capital One. That really allows each team to sort of manage their own capacity. So what we've done is broken into small groups that support each of our different lines of business, and depending on volume, they may have more than one team, but each of those groups has a finite amount of capacity that we have determined that they can do. And when a request comes in, the request is sized. We go through, we decide, we use points as a basis, and how many points does this equal? So if they have a bunch of small stuff, they can do more campaigns at one time, or if they have a couple really large campaigns, then they'll work on 2 until those are done, but it's rolling. It's not monthly. It's as soon as one thing ends, and they can bring another thing in. That is a somewhat recent change that has worked really well because it puts the control of that capacity and the flow back in the hands of the business that we're working with, because they are determining what is worked on. From a very high level, I don't care what you're going to work, you have to determine that priority because you know your business. I know the channel and I can help you execute what you're doing, but you have to tell me what's most important and what we should focus on first.
So you use this point system, right? So why not just tell people like, hey, we don't have time, this is what we can do this week. How did you come to a point system?
It's always hard to quantify the work that we do. And if you say, well, it takes us X many hours to do this, somebody can very easily say, well, that shouldn't take that long. It should only take this long. So we went through an exercise that was somewhat painful, but to come up with these micro calculations of each little bit of the work that we do. And we know about how many hours that takes, but we put it into points because it's much harder to argue points. You know, they don't know. And we looked at current campaigns and about how long they took and about how many we usually could do at a time and kept it around that. So they didn't feel like they were losing, you know, capacity, but it helped make it more clear that they could understand this is taking up this chunk of the available capacity that we have. That makes it takes any sort of, it makes it less subjective.
Right.
You know, it's this many points, that's what it is. And if you decide to, you know, make something less complicated, then it's gonna be fewer points. And that's helpful sometimes because, as we all know, sometimes things are overly complicated for no good reason. Just that's how they wanna do it. Or the data people don't want to take the time to
Right.
do it a different way. This really has made them go, oh, if I can get data to do this, then you know, it'll be a point less, and then I can do more.
Is there some equivalent of a point, or is this just sort of a gut feel that you
No,
guys?
there is.
Okay.
We don't share that, though.
Oh.
Our team knows
So you couldn't
what
share
that
it
is.
here because it could get out
Right.
and cause problems. All right, got it. No, I think one of the things that continued to come up as we started talking about this was this idea of anonymizing hours, right? That as soon as how many people are reporting kind of their time utilization against projects in terms of total hours? And I know that's sort of how the industry is set up, and yet it does start to work against you because there's always this question of, well, wait a minute, that shouldn't take that many hours. But there are other factors that don't always get considered.
And concurrent projects also factors into that.
Right.
You know, if I'm only working on one thing, obviously I can work faster on that one thing. But if I'm working on 5 things concurrently, each of those is going to go a little bit more slowly.
Right.
And so the business then has some control over that as well. And they may say, you know, we have 15 points left over, but we're not going to use them right now because we want to get this out the door immediately. Right. Now, that doesn't happen very often, but they could.
Right.
And again, it gives them that control.
Right. So when we talk about efficiency, right, we have this aspect of quality that all of you have referenced, right? We can't make mistakes. We've got speed is sort of another factor, and then there's this idea of kind of new and different and innovative, right, that seems to buck the trend of operational efficiency, right? Operational efficiency says do things the same every single time. How do you jive that or meld that with this need that we all have in this industry to innovate, to do different stuff, to try different things? How do you meld innovation with be efficient?
So for us, we kind of need to be operationally efficient before we can innovate. It's really important for us working with secondhand goods, especially in an auction format, to build trust with our user base. So quality is first and foremost, no matter what. Speed comes shortly thereafter, and then once we have all of those important things, a good foundation, then we can start to iterate and learn and really start to be innovative.
I think for us, I don't want my people to have to spend a ton of time on the standard, you know, business as usual campaigns that are going to go out the door very regularly that maybe we can't automate, but are very, very cut and dry. So if we have a really strong process that we can use for those and really limit the time there, then it allows us to have the time for innovation and use that build, you know, sort of process to have more time to iterate, to look at new technologies, to add things in, because you're not spending an inordinate amount of time on the stuff that shouldn't take very long.
Right.
For us, similar, we have weekly capacity guidelines that we don't try to go above, and so with the teams that are sending out all of our emails, they have some time carved out each week to make sure that they're thinking about, you know, what are some recommendations for automating an existing campaign or doing something differently or innovating that way. And then secondly, we pull out like strategic teams at certain times during the year that focus on innovation. So cross-functionally, leadership across the company will come together and say, you know, what can we do better, or what are some things that are happening industry-wide that we'd like to try.
Is there some sort of a balance there in terms of time that you're trying to target? Like, hey, we want a standard campaign to take this amount of time, or does it vary? How much of your effort is that versus the new stuff?
For me personally, I should be focusing more like 80% on the new stuff, but my team should be focusing 80% on getting things done.
Okay.
So that's kind of how we handle it.
Okay. Others, any guidelines? Okay. So, in your respective efforts to find ways to basically save time, what are some of the big takeaways, lessons, things that you've said, hey, we need to do this, this is what I've learned, is really what helps us to drive this sort of efficiency?
I think for us, it was sort of what I talked about before, finding those places where we can have repeatable processes or a standard code base that everyone can use for, you know, our typical messages, so that we're not spending a ton of time there. I think also tools, any sort of process tools, are an untapped helper. You know, I think a lot of times people hear about a tool and they assume it's going to be expensive or that it's going to be hard to implement, and they get scared away and they don't want to do it. But I think having some sort of tool to help you through your process is invaluable. And it could be as simple, you know, if you're a team of one and you don't really have anybody else, it can be a list of the 6 things that you do every time you go through, and you can check them off and make sure that it's there. Or you can use one of the larger, you know, tools that's out there, workflow management tools, or, you know, proofing tools, or whatever.
What are some of the tools that you found particularly helpful?
For us, we actually have built tools because we've tried a few different ones and had some success, but never found anything that really met the needs. Because if you're, I think we were talking about this, there's a lot of teams that are sort of partially in Agile, partially not. And for email in particular, if you're backing out of a deadline, you know, by definition, you are no longer Agile. So it's hard. So we have, you know, we've tried LeanKit, we've tried version 1, we've tried, you know, Jira and Confluence. There's all of those, but none of them met our needs exactly. So I have a few amazing developers on my team who said we could build something better, and we built something internally, you know, that sizes our campaigns, that we have a digital intake form, we have a project board that's very similar to an Agile board, but that lists out how big is it, when is the drop date, what's going on. So I know that's not helpful because
And how many
internal.
points it has.
Yes, and how many points it has. But I think the key is look around, because there may be something that can help you, and could be free even, and it will help.
Right. Grace, what about you?
For us, I think one of the biggest takeaways as far as being efficient is really simplicity, especially since we're working cross-functionally, and communication's a huge part of that, but also just simplifying what we're doing. And the new templates that we've been using are a great example of that. We had this beast of a library before, really complicated process, and we paired it back to exactly what we needed, and it's been working very well and saving us lots of time.
Right. Now, how quickly, just to give people context, once you identify that there is an event that you're going to be promoting, how long do you have to turn that around and promote that estate sale?
How long do we have, or how long does it take to?
How long do you have, and then how long does it take?
So it definitely depends on how much planning we've done in advance, but our sales last for 5 days, so our inventory is constantly changing. It's very time sensitive, so it can be anything from a sale that's been planned for weeks, or it could be a sale got moved and now we need to replace it with another sale. So it really just depends on those last minute hot fires.
Okay.
So I would say for any time that you're trying to create efficiencies or do things better or faster, people have to change the way that they're doing things, and that's hard. So it's hard to get people committed to changing. So the way that we've really found works best is showing the impact to the business. So it's not just we can save 6 hours per week if we do it this way. It's what can we do with that 6 hours? So what other campaigns can we take on? What projects can we do? And what's the bottom line dollar impact to the business? And that's how you really get people on board.
Yeah, I know that to me is particularly impactful because so often when we talk about efficiency, even tools that drive efficiency, right? So you have some of the templating tools. It's always a discussion about how much time is this going to save me? And it occurred to me that saving a person's time actually has no benefit to the bottom line, right? That your salary is a sunk cost, right? So just getting you to do your job faster, to some means, oh, well, that means that Marlies is going to leave work early today.
And
right?
our teams generally are so lean for email. Like, you don't really have the ability to get rid of headcount.
Right, right. So, and so, yeah, if you say, hey, we're going to be able to do 10 more campaigns this month because of all these efficiencies we've done, that's much more likely to be received well. So, I think we have some time for questions. I want to just make a little plug here because it is Trendline Spirit Week, and it's college day at Trendline today. So I'm just going to go ahead and represent my school. Also, oh yeah, huh? Little plug, yeah. And we got a couple Cal Bears in the audience. So anyway, time for questions.
I don't know. Hi, Stefan from Frazee. Could you give me any advice on managing offices in multiple time zones? Not even just email related, but just any advice at all, because I'm exhausted.
For us,
Melatonin.
sometimes we have people work shifted schedules. Obviously, depending on how apart you are, that doesn't always work. But sometimes we do that. Otherwise, this is kind of silly, but Slack has been an amazing thing for our teams that are across channels. So I have this team in 5 locations. We feel like we really know each other now. And there's silliness that goes on in there, but there's also a lot of work stuff that goes on in there, and it has made us a more cohesive team to always have a place to talk. And then people who are shifted in time, like other people will check in later, or you'll catch it in the morning or whatever, but it's sort of this ongoing conversation that you have. So that's not a good answer, but.
Yeah, and I know for us, because we have people spread out through multiple time zones, combination of work front for us to do project management, so one person completes a task, it shows up on the next person's calendar is really big. And then, yes, chat tools that are constantly being filled up and communicated through.
Hi, I'm Ellie from Rue La La. So I actually have 2 questions. My first question is, how do you reinforce the point systems or like the weekly capacity schedule with other teams?
For us, it's really just having a lot of consistent communications and check-ins with those teams. So we'll have standing meetings where certain decisions need to get made, and it's just in that meeting reinforcing the same message, like we can't go over this amount, otherwise we'll be sacrificing quality.
Got it.
I think for us, it's when we change our process, we actually do rollouts to the teams that we work with to explain to them why we're changing the process, what the benefit is going to be to them, and sort of what the assumptions are that they have to meet to make sure that then we can have the process go as it is. And then for the 20 points that we use for us, having a visual system to show them that. I think any sort of transparency you can have with the people that you work with helps, because it makes it seem less like you're just making things up. But if they can see it sitting there and they're like, oh yeah, I have 6 campaigns and here's what they add up to, clearly my capacity is full. That just helps to reinforce that they do have a lot of stuff going on and we're doing a lot of work for them.
Thank you. And my second question is, so when emergencies come up that require going over that 40 hours a week, how do you reward team members for doing that extra work?
You say, how do you reward?
Yes.
Oh, it's a good question. Say thank you, and no, I mean, definitely rewarding people with recognition of what occurred, sharing results of what happened with that campaign. So if it was something that was a marketing promotion, like how did it perform, what was the impact to the business, to really empower them, and then also just like team lunches or special individual recognition. That always goes a long way too.
And I think if somebody really goes out of their way, I think it's also fair to just say, hey, don't come into work this next time.
That's what we
you
do,
know.
yeah.
So.
Give them Morgan's hat. Morgan, panel, thank you very much, guys.